This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And here we are on the latest edition of Sundays with Dominic and Vito. I have Joe Everett of NFL Draft Bible. He's an NFL draft guru, as I like to say, and a guy that used to be on my show all the time. So it's been a while, and good to talk to you right now, Joe.
Great to be on, Vito. Been too long, man. I hope you're doing good out there.
I'm doing well. I'm hanging in there. And, you know, obviously we got different circumstances, different times that we're living in and living through right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, which seemingly has affected everybody. And whether it be financially, health related, whatever it is, you name it, it's affected everybody, and including our sports and the NFL. And really what recently was impacted by it was the NFL draft that took place over the weekend. 3 days in a virtual format, Joe, as you know now, for the first time ever. And the draft still happened and was a huge success, a ratings bonanza. People tuned in from everywhere and loved watching it. And some have said, Joe, even that the NFL did better by doing it virtually with the executives, the coaches, the players at home with their families. So really quick to get to that now, Joe, to start off here on Sundays with Dominic and Vito this week. Your thoughts on how the draft went in a virtual format for the first time ever?
Well, as you mentioned, it was definitely the highest rated draft we've had ever. I think probably the highest rated thing going on next to the Last Dance featuring Michael Jordan's Bulls of the 90s. I think there are some positives to take note. I've never been a fan of the green room scene where every pick they pan to the player and Lee Steinberg or whichever agent it is, and they're glued to their cell phones, and out of nowhere they high five somebody and cry on a phone. At least now these players were with their families, they were with people they know, and it's like everyone had their own personal draft party, and I think that gave us some variety. It also gave us a little window into the general managers and the owners, the people that run these teams and the coaches of their homes, and it brought us in to see a little bit of, I am so jealous of Cliff Kingsbury and his mansion. I'd say that first off, but there's also some great scenes with like Mike Vrabel and his family, or Bill Belichick and his amazing husky dog. There's just a different flavor, so that was bonus. I do know though, it took a little bit longer. I think days 1, 2, and rounds 2 and 3, but at the same time, it was definitely a positive, I think, in sports that something was happening. I think it was a bit uplifting for some football fans for certain.
Yeah, I mean, it really brought that personal touch. We were in the homes of, like from the Detroit Lions perspective, as a Lions guy and covering the Lions now for SI All Lions, you saw Bob Quinn, you saw Matt Patricia with their kids. To see that family element, that personal touch put on the draft that we haven't seen in the past, have never seen in the past, and now have it here in 2020, despite the extremely tough circumstances, uncertain times with the coronavirus pandemic. It was kind of good to try to get removed, kind of remove ourselves at least for a little bit for the sake of the 3 days of the draft, and to see how these guys live, how they do it, and how they still got it done. I mean, they conducted the draft with their family around and still got through the draft. And maybe it took a little bit longer, as you said, Joe, but I think it went really well for the NFL's sake. And for all sports fans, it was a huge win for the NFL this past weekend.
Definitely enjoyed Coach Patricia, and he's got some cute kids, that's for certain. But also, I think not only do they have a good draft, it was just I think I'd rather have that almost going forward. If they were going to make some change or just retain something from this year, I'd be more inclined, as opposed to just like those giant draft rooms where I know it's much better for them to have everyone all on the same page, all in the same war room, so to speak. But it definitely made it a little bit more intimate.
It definitely did. You know what? There really weren't too many technological snafus. I mean, you saw the host of the draft on ESPN, Trey Wingo, and his crew a couple of times, Joe, and that was really it too.
That's what was shocking. You almost wanted to believe that someone was in a timeout or the internet being dropped, this and that. I know a lot of general managers and that the evaluators took extra measures, multiple lines. I know Chris Ballard here in Indy had a generator in case he lost power. So there were definitely extra measures taken so that no glitches took place. But I think that was a big takeaway. I was amazed how smooth it actually went.
Yeah, and the Lions had an IT guy in the driveway of Bob Quinn. I mean, think about that, Joe. That was something else too to hear.
Well, that's smart too. I mean, I think that's kind of the nature of these general managers. They are, I don't want to say OCD, but definitely when you get to a position like that, there's no stone left unturned with that type of people and people in that high up a position.
Absolutely, and it seems like the Lions got their guy at number 3 overall in Jeff Okudah, the standout cornerback from Ohio State. A guy that I thought, Joe, they could have traded down and still gotten. And obviously, as the results happened in the top 10 of the draft, the Lions could have traded down and gotten him, let's say, at number 9. That's when C.J. Henderson was taken by the Jaguars. So the Lions could have gotten Okudah seemingly as late as number 9 in the first round of the NFL draft. Decided to take him at number 3, not to trade down and to take him with their original selection in the first round. Your thoughts on the Lions selection of Jeff Okudah at number 3 overall?
I think they stay there in the simple fact they didn't want to risk someone. If they trade down and give it to a quarterback needy team, say at 6 would have been, I think, the smartest move just to ensure, because Okudah that's the premium cornerback in this class. Not only talent wise, just talking to him, he's extremely professional. Just real razor sharp when you interview the kid. The mental side checks, the intangible checks, and then when you watch him on the field, there's no doubt that was the best, not only the best corner at Ohio State, but one of the best corners in college football outside of Stingley from LSU. I think he also, clearly the Lions had the need. They're moving on from Slay, who I think people argue that maybe Darius Slay being the proven corner, I'm still not buying that he was the perfect fit for Matty P's defense, to where Okudah is exactly what they want. They can also teach him the techniques and fundamentals that they want and watch him grow and flourish in that system. So I think the need is there, but also this is a player they believe in that's not just going to start for them, but going to be he's going to turn into one of the best starters in the league. And like I said, after studying him, interviewing him, I have no doubt that's going to be one of the better corners in the very near future in this NFL.
He seems like he's a really mature young man as well, kind of like you're saying already, Joe, when you interviewed him and in the post-draft press conference after he was drafted and talking to the media. I mean, he stood out with his professionalism, his maturity. All of that stood out definitely regarding Jeff Okudah, and that was great to see as a Lions fan and pundit alike. But I also want to get to this factor with the pick. Was that great value for the Lions at number 3? Because they got their man. He's going to be good from all accounts and according to you as well from your evaluation of him. But how about the value of taking him at number 3?
I think he was going to go top 5 with those quarterbacks, with Chase Young. I think what really sticks out about him, not only the pedigree of school, the program he comes from, but now its positional value is changing, I believe, in the league. It used to be pass rushers, offensive tackles are the first positions off the board after the quarterback goes. It's always been premium on quarterbacks. I don't know if that will ever change in the league, but I think now with some of these statistics that people are using, the different valuations, I think teams are starting to shift over to defensive backs, not necessarily safeties, but corners that you can leave out on that island. As a result, you will get coverage sacks, and not even coverage sacks, but it's become such a passing league that teams don't run a base defense anymore. They run out in a nickel, and they need 3 defensive backs, and more specifically, 3 quality corners on a team has become a priority, I think, for a lot of these squads, and particularly Detroit. You're playing against Kirk Cousins, you're playing against the great Aaron Rodgers. Say what you want about Chicago, but I think getting out of the NFC, if you want to make it to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to stop some really great passing offenses, namely, Russell Wilson out there, and you can't forget about the Saints and Sean Payton and Drew Brees, that passing attack. I think corner has become almost more important than pass rusher these days, which I'm almost, it's tough for me to say because, there's been rules of thumb that we live by in the draft. You have to get the quarterback, you got to protect the quarterback, and then you got to have a quarterback. It's like those 3 cardinal rules you are etched in stone. But now I think they're in pencil. And what's starting to get inked in is that if you don't have the talent on the perimeter stopping these great wide receivers in the league, then that you have to address it. And to me, that's the Lions showing their foresight, showing their investigation into the actual numbers. I think they really have done the research, and they value corner more so than ever.
And as a passing league, you need a top-notch cornerback. They lost Darius Slay. They traded him to the Eagles earlier in the offseason. So Jeff Okudah is the number 1 cornerback coming into 2020, perhaps, along with Desmond Trufant, but for sure for the long-term future in Motown. So once again, a passer's league, you need a quarterback. The Lions right now have a steady veteran presence at the quarterback position in Matthew Stafford, a guy who's entering his 12th year in the league in 2020, but he missed half the season last year with the back ailment. So I got to bring this up. Tua Tagovailoa was available at number 3 overall. Eventually went to the Dolphins at number 5. What do you think about the Lions passing on him? And do you think that would have been a good selection for them at number 3 as well?
I wouldn't have faulted it for him, but them making this move clearly tells me that they were not in love with this particular quarterback class. Maybe they would have liked Burrow, but that's not a possibility with him going at 1. But with this being such a defensive and offensive line laden type draft, to me, this kind of tells me they may have a little bit future sight on that next year's draft. Potentially Mr. Lawrence being a member of that. But even if that's not the case, I think I applaud teams that if they do not believe in a particular quarterback class, don't take a quarterback then. I honestly think that if that particular player that you want to lead your team is not available in the class, why force the issue? I see so many teams, well, we've just got to address this, and we're taking a guy, and that's what we're doing, and we're just sticking this round peg in a square slot and let the chips fall where they may. And that, to me, is not intricate. That's not the way you want to build your infrastructure. You want specific pieces in place to play the way and the type of ball you want to play. And I think that's what the Lions are saying. Number one, that this isn't the quarterback class that they want to invest in. And also, they may have their eyes on a future year. But then again, therein lies the question. If you don't start winning, future years may exist without you and your staff. So it's a bold move by Quinn and Patricia, the brain trust there. But I really think the player they took will be a player on the team 10 plus years from now. Not only character, intangibles, and talent, the 3, I think, most important parts of a player that, you never know. We could all be wrong about these players, but you're projecting so much. But if I were to project any of these players from this draft class, Okudah is one. It's tough not to just rubber stamp and say, yeah, you're looking at a Pro Bowler, a guy's going to play 10 plus years in the league, and he's got a chance to be a real great one.
And Joe, it looks like the Lions taking a page out of the Patriots playbook yet again. The Patriots don't take a quarterback without Tom Brady now for the first time in 20 years. Get a guy, an undrafted free agent, and Brian Lewerke, who played his college ball at Michigan State. And the Lions also, as we've already discussed now kind of here, did not take a quarterback in this NFL draft. So I guess they kind of took a page out of Bill Belichick's playbook here and said, hey, let's wait. And maybe they're going to wait until next year. And same thing with the Patriots. And not to totally change the topic here or go to another team, but the Pats had that big hole at quarterback. They didn't take a guy in this year's draft. Maybe they're looking at Trevor Lawrence next year or somebody else in next year's draft class.
I don't remember the last time the first round quarterback went, because Jimmy Garoppolo was a second rounder. So that's one of the highest picks they've had. You may have to go back to Drew Bledsoe for them, but that's just not in their MO. And I think clearly Quinn, Patricia, coming from that building, from the whole Foxborough Football Academy there, if you will, they have very similar tendencies, play the same brand of ball, and they invest so much into the defensive side, offensive line, and once again, defensive backs. You look at New England's secondary for the last few years, it's been the same crew of guys, the McCourtys, Chung, and then Stephon Gilmore, I guess, is the addition, but they've put most of their assets as far as cap. Gilmore's one of the highest players on the team, and the McCourtys have been taken care of. Chung, these guys have been there for years. I mean, Chung's an institution, as well as Devin McCourty. I think that's where they really want to put a lot of their chips, so to speak, in that team, and that's what we're seeing Detroit do. I don't, I guess the saying "the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree" is very true here.
I think it is very applicable to Quinn Trisha, as many people in Detroit call Quinn and Patricia and the duo of those guys, Joe. So, yeah, they get a lot from the Pats. And then back to the Lions and what they did in the draft this year. In the second round, they take DeAndre Swift, stud running back out of Georgia at number 35 overall. Your thoughts on that selection by the Lions?
It's hard not to like Swift. He's very talented. He's got a great all-around game. And the tough part is I am a very big fan of Kerryon Johnson. But the bottom line is he has had difficulty staying healthy. I think he just had another knee surgery, missed 6 games 2019. I don't know if it was 6 games in 2018, but the bottom line is he has not completed his last 2 seasons, and that's an issue. But also, you do want to just have talent at that position. They clearly want to run the ball with the moves they've been making in Detroit. Drafting Frank Ragnow years before, there's a heck of a player I think they got last year. And the additions they've made this year on offensive line shows you their commitment to run the ball. They want to be able to run the ball when they have to and close games out. So Swift is a big part of that. And I applaud teams for just wanting to improve the room. You can't just have one good running back. And clearly this is Detroit saying we not only want great depth and quality at that position, but we want 2 stud backs, and that's what they've got here. Swift, I really don't think there's too much weakness to his game at all, and him falling to second round, there was teams that were rumored to take him in the first, so I think they got a day 1 player at the start of day 2 there for themselves, and once again, they turned a position that may be a question mark on their roster into a strength. So that's definitely a positive to take away from drafting Swift. I also believe this year's class, when you look at it, there was a drop-off, to me, a significant drop-off after the first 4 backs went. And once day 2 started, obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire went day 1. But once day 2 started, those other 3 backs went real quick. Jonathan Taylor to the Colts, and then Akers also to the Rams. It just seemed like the dominoes fell very fast at that position. So I think it was smart by the Lions to quickly nab off the top of just take a slice right off the top there and get one of the premium backs available in this class.
How about, though, the fact the Lions had the huge need among the pass rushing department, waited until the 3rd round to get Julian Okwara, who's a great edge rusher, let's say, right? Potentially can be that at the NFL level as well. But they could have gotten somebody else in the second round, Blacklock, Epineza, Gross Matos. I mean, they could have gotten these three dudes there at number 35 overall. Guys, I think are better than Okwara. Now, Okwara might be really good once again. It might be a really good value pick for the Lions in the third round. I just thought it was a little bit questionable on the Lions' part for not getting an edge rusher, just a pass rusher in general at number 35 overall. But your thoughts on that, Joe?
Well, I think it's fit what they're looking for. They really wanted that stand-up pass rusher. And, it did. There was a little bit of a head scratcher there in terms of, where a guy like Gross Matos fits on that squad. And I think that's why he goes to Carolina. He's more of a base end, as is Epinesa. And then you see the Patriots later on taking Josh Uche. Well, that's your standard pass rusher, stand-up edge man. And I think, like I said, it's more of a specific fit. And also there's something to be said about cornering the market on Okwara's, having both the brothers there. And if that's not a little flavor of New England as well, they've got the McCourty twins. Well, now Detroit has the Okwara brothers in tow. I do believe Okwara, though, especially being a huge supporter of Notre Dame football and watching every one of their games, were it not for that broken fibula, I think Okwara goes a lot higher. So that's where I see Detroit. They realize he's still on the board, what kind of fit he would be in their scheme, and also they're improving the locker room there with a really great kid. And a kid that just wants to be great. I think he has done so much work in the offseason, and that's what's unfortunate. He put in, I think, just a ton of prep before the 2019 football season, and to have it end that way, it breaks your heart a little bit, because I would like to see how high he would have been selected, quite frankly, with the talent he has. To me, he was the more talented of the two brothers. And was, of course, say what you want about Romeo. If he not to have some off-field issues, he may have been a high selection. But the bottom line is, I think Julian, where they got him is, and when they got him is why he falls to the third. That to me was a day two or a round two type of prospect that they got at the very start of round three. And I look at it most important. It's fit there for Julian. He's going to be standing up on the outside in their version of the 3-4. I know that's not what they run all the time, but to me that really is going to give them a lot of variables and a lot of versatility, with not just a guy who's hand in the dirt, but can do a number of things.
Yeah, now you have the brother duo, right? Romeo and Julian Okwara. So Julian, though, has the injury pass and the health risk. How much do you take that into account now with his NFL career as he starts that up here in 2020?
Well, I don't know that it's a number of injuries that it's like piling up on him. And to me, a broken fibula is, when it's a bone injury, I don't have as big an issue if it were the ACL. I mean, and even ACL is starting to become more standard. I mean, the real killer anymore is if a guy's had an Achilles or a patella tendon. Those are long roads to recovery, whereas a clean break on the fibula, I think. Now, granted, I'm not Dr. Chow or any of these NFL experts, mind you, but I think this is an injury he rehabs from and quickly gets back in tow. It's just the only downside for him is that he was unable to work out. He was senior in this year, so he undoubtedly would have been at the Senior Bowl and able to perform at that event and showcase his skills, and that was taken away from him. So, but on the other token, though, too, with this pandemic we've had to deal with, not a lot of people were able to get private workouts. Not a lot of people got pro days. So the pro day circuit was decimated, and all the sit down and in person, bring them in the building, work them out interviews, those were pretty much completely off the table. So that may have helped Okwara to some sense, but I think this is an injury he rehabs from. And once this guy's full bore, I think you're going to see he could end up being one of the best pass rushers on the team. And I'm not saying any knock on Trey Flowers, but I think Julian is highly talented, and what may look like a roll of the dice or taking a chance, bottom line is you're taking a chance on every player in the draft. But this guy is certainly well worth the risk, in my opinion.
And then after Julian, they got Jonah Jackson in the third round. And then they followed that up with the pick of Logan Stenberg. So you got two big guards, back-to-back picks for the Lions. And they needed to upgrade their own line. What are your thoughts on those two selections? And once again, guards back-to-back.
I like it because these are two of my favorite guards in the class, and I've talked directly with both of them. Jonah is quality kid, almost a little too business when you talk. He's a very serious guy, but he's played a lot of football, and he's been coached by some of the best there. I mean, particularly Ohio State, working with Kevin Wilson. There's a lot of linemen in the league that would tell you Kevin Wilson's one of the best offensive line coaches they've had in their careers. And Kevin Wilson really nabbed him right from Rutgers. Jonah had graduated and he had 1 year left to eligibility. And before he even started investigating schools, Kevin Wilson's on the horn to him saying, "We've got a spot for you right now. Tell me where you're going to be next season." He said, "Columbus, Ohio sounds good to me, coach." So they have definitely a good relationship there. And then I just think a guy that's seen a lot of good competition, played a high level of ball. And then Logan Stenberg's just a throwback. You watch some of his footage. He plays to the whistle and a little bit beyond, if you get my meaning. And if anyone's finishing a play, it's Logan. He has been penalized a little bit in his career for just, going aboard. He's just aggressive. He really is out there to embarrass his opponent. And even when questioned about it, people are saying, "Well, you've gotten some penalties. He replies instantly with, "I don't think the league is worried about me getting too physical. And also, I play football the way it's supposed to be played," is what Logan would tell you. And I tell you, if there's trouble to be had, it's trouble for whoever's lining up against Logan, because that he's going to go, like I said, all the way to the whistle and a little bit beyond to prove his point. I think a throwback, really physical lineman like that fits the mold of what Detroit wants to be. We talked about adding that other running back and wanting to be able to close out games and shorten up games, particularly. Bleed the clock dry while you're just getting first downs. I don't think anybody be happier about that than Coach Patricia. And that's why they bring big Halep, big Vitae and Ragnow. This line right now is starting to add up to some real stocky Jessies that are going to knock you cold from first quarter on into fourth. And that's the kind of MO it seems that they want to be. I think they really want to be a strong running team, and if you will, a throwback team. A team that's not afraid to just get the short yardage, and like I said, shortening up games, getting out of there quick. That's what they want to do. Keep the ball away from the other squad that you're playing. That's what Logan Stenberg and Jonah Jackson are going to help with. I really am a huge fan of Stenberg. Like I said, that. Once you guys get to see him play a little ball, I think he's going to endear himself to fans very quickly.
And in Detroit with Darryl Bubble as the OC, it's run heavy, right? I mean, it's run first really even with Matthew Stafford as your longtime franchise passer. So you add Jonah Jackson, I think he can start at right guard immediately, and you can tell me whether or not that's true, Joe. And then Logan Stenberg, he's an old school guard, like you said. You've already summed it up eloquently and terrifically, Joe. But, I mean, he's old school, he's nasty, and he brings that tenacity. And he'll tell you first and foremost when he talks about his style of play that he plays nasty. So you got to love that about Logan Stenberg. And I think Logan could be a really high-value pick for where the Lions got him as well. And same thing with Jonah Jackson, too, in the third round.
That's why they've got two quality running backs now. I think it doesn't some people may look at a draft like that as like, well, why you just took one? Why would you take two? There's only maybe one opening at a right guard for them. Let them battle it out and improve the room. I think so few people give enough credit to this draft strategy with the doubling up, you're basically addressing a need with twofold, and you're going out of your way to say, hey, we don't like our guard room right now. We want to just improve that part of our locker room. Let's make sure those interior offensive line meetings now are very competitive and intense. And I think with this opening at right guard, all credit to Odeobushi or Ben Showell, whoever wants to compete, but the guard spot, because I think Frank Ragnow is locked down at center, but the guard spots right now will be highly contested on the team, and there really needs to be more said for teams that just open up a competition and say, hey, you guys want to prove where you belong? Go battle it out. Go be great right now, because we're giving you the opportunity. And, this is going to be, I think, one of the biggest competitions in the off season and leading up to the start of the season to watch is, who really wants to get that starting spot.
And then, Joe, 2 picks for the Lions in the 5th round. They took Quintez Cephas out of Wisconsin, wide receiver from Wisconsin, then a running back in Jason Huntley from New Mexico State with their second 5th-round selection. Cephas had some off-the-field issues at Wisconsin. Good, talented wideout when he played. Now, Huntley is a versatile running back. I know he can play receiver, can return kicks. But I thought that was a little bit more questionable than Cephas. Even with Cephas's off-the-field issues, I kind of understood that selection in the 5th round more than taking Huntley, another back when you already took DeAndre Swift, and you have Kerryon Johnson, you have Ty Johnson in the Lions backfield already, and then you take Huntley. And I know it's the 5th round. He's versatile. But I thought that pick was a little bit questionable on behalf of Bob Quinn and company.
Well, I think he's a special teamer right now. That's what they really want to go out and make sure they've got somebody to return kicks, return punts, and that's really his forte. In my book, what was it, Agnew last year? That's the guy that would be slated right now. But be that as it may, Huntley's an ace back there, and that's the strongest part of his game, I believe, is kickoff returns, the speed he brings to the table, and just being a general ball handler. And also a guy at NFLPA game, talking to him, I think you go across the board with the exception of Cephas, they're looking at their locker room and who they want to add, who they believe is a Lion. Jason Huntley, I thought that maybe it's a little earlier than what I thought he would have been selected. But to me, I think from Jump Street, that's your new kick returner for the Lions. A guy that was just so dynamic, maybe not so much last season as a senior, but you roll that tape back to his junior and sophomore years, he was just unstoppable as a kick returner. I think easily one of the most productive players on that Aggie squad. So I'm a huge supporter of Huntley. 5th round did kind of raise an eyebrow from me, I will admit, but I think that guy, he's quickly going to turn into a special teams demon for the Lions. And Cephas, though, that's not only was it off field a question mark, and we don't know the specifics, so I won't dig into that. All I will say, he had a really slow 40 time, did not take his workout seriously. So that's the one pick from this draft that I question. And also, they must have vetted it out. So I can only assume that they had an online meeting with him, or they know a coach that is vouching for him. That's usually the case in an instance like this, when you hear a very much recurring and consistent reports that he had issues at Wisconsin. So I'm wanting to believe his position coach for the Badgers, or another coach that knows him well, vouched for him and really spoke out on his behalf here. So the Lions, that's why they must have believed enough to take him in the 5th round. But he definitely has some talent, and a positional receiver that he uses his body so well and has great balance. I think Cephas could turn into a player. He's not too far removed from being a poor man's Marvin Jones, if you will. I don't think he's got Marvin's speed, but I think that's the only question mark I have of those 2 picks. I really like Huntley. I think I'm not going to say day one he's the kick returner, but he will prove his worth very quickly in preseason play, is my guess for Jason Huntley.
Vito Churko here with Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible. And speaking of Cephas, you're not too high on him. So is he your lowest graded Lions draft pick from this year's draft? Or if not, who is that player?
Well, tough to go out and just say who's the pick I dislike the most. But yeah, I'd have to say just from the simple fact of the wide receiver class this year being so talented, I mean, there was some players available like KJ Hill from Ohio State in the 7th round. They could have had Hodgins, the Oregon State receiver. Prochet was available. Now, and there, if you want to criticize the Huntley pick or the Cephas, Donovan Peoples-Jones went in the 6th round, and he is a very talented kick returner. He's not much of a wide receiver just yet, but as far as physical athletic ability, bringing a talent like that, I think in a really a large wide receiver class, and just I thought a talented group of receivers. There were some other players on the board at that position available. So yeah, once again, I've got to believe Coach really went up to bat strong for him and gotten either Patricia's ear or Darrell Bevel's ear, or I don't know, Coach Prince, the receivers coach, if he's still there, if that's the guy. Someone in that coaching staff was banging the table hard for him, and so that's probably why they went as high as they did on Cephas. Because yeah, it's a bit of a risky pick when there were issues at Wisconsin.
Your best value pick for the Lions is who?
I'd have to say where they got the guards. I thought Logan Stenberg was going to go a lot higher, so he'd probably be my value pick. I mean, it's tough because I thought Swift, the running back, was going to be the first running back off the board and a borderline first-round pick. So I think it's a coup getting him in the 2nd round, but still, that's a high, expensive draft. So I would go Logan Stenberg, 4th round, 15th pick. That I would have assumed he was a day 2 pick, but even not day 2, I just think that's a guy that's going to be a big-time return on investment, end up starting quite a few games for you because not only the style he plays, the aggression he brings to the table, but I think Fraley, the O-line coach, is really going to like him from day one. And that's another – I think this draft, we had a lot of coach sway, being that it was – if it's on Zoom or whatever video conference they are using, I think the offensive line coach is banging that table pretty hard to get Logan Stenberg, get me some more interior help. And where they was able to get Logan, that may be a 4th rounder that turns into a long-time starter for the Lions.
So this just was Bob Quinn's 5th draft as Lions general manager. I think it might have been his best as well, since he took over the GM position for Detroit in 2016. How would you grade how Bob Quinn did in this year's draft?
Oh, I think he did just fine. I mean, this is it addressed some needs, and they got a premium player right off the top that make a lot of teams jealous, in my opinion. And also the 2nd round where you're getting Swift and what kind of impact he could make and the difficulties they've had keeping guys healthy. I thought the 2018 draft is pretty doggone good when they got Ragnow and Kerryon Johnson, but they just didn't have a lot of picks flat out. I don't want to say one of his worst drafts, but 2017 still, to me, is a head scratcher. You take Kenny Galladay out of that class. Robert's not even on a team anymore. Where Tabor's at? I mean, you could put him on the side of a milk carton. But Galladay is basically the pick from 2017 that you're coming away with. So last year, I don't want to, throw too much out because we still have to evaluate these guys. I think you owe it to them. But Hawkinson, to me, is a home run. But where Tavai fits in the system, I think linebackers that they've got, they need to pan out for Quinn. And right now, it's what is it, year 5, like you said?
Year 5, yeah.
I'd say this was his strongest draft. You'd have to chalk it up, and just by sheer volume of picks too, he was able to address more needs with this. probably the same amount of picks as last season, but I think you're coming away with more talent here. Now, granted, though, you are picking a lot higher than he's picked in the past, that 3 slot. So you certainly, if the Lions are picking in the top 5 again next year, it may not be Mr. Quinn making those selections. So that's something to be prepared for. They need to really start winning some games, or this regime, it's going to get a little sweaty for them.
Absolutely. I mean, you went 3-12-1 a season ago and underachieved. And I know they had injuries. Matt Stafford missed half the season, but they were 3-4-1 with them. And after that, they didn't win a game again, and they got to improve, and they have to do better than 6-10. And there was that mandate, so-called mandate from ownership and the Ford family, Martha Ford and her daughter, to turn around this franchise, make it a playoff contender in 2020. So this draft is meaningful. Will have to play huge dividends for the team this season and how it does perform. The only thing is, when we evaluate drafts, and you're the draft evaluator year to year, I mean, how many years do we give a draft before we can truly evaluate it and say how good or how bad it was, Joe?
Oh, I think minimum. It's got to be 3 years minimum, because, it is so tough for some of these kids to not only pick up the speed of the game, but pick up a professional scheme. And then also, some of these kids get injured. There's just no way around having a year off and what kind of setback that can be. And, you look at the quarterbacks from just a few years, that class that had Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, and Sam Darnold, and who's the last guy taken? Lamar Jackson. Well, it took Lamar a whole year before he really got his feet wet, and then last year we actually have seen something from him. And if you were to grade all those quarterbacks, I think a lot of people right now would reverse it, and Baker Mayfield may not be the first one coming off the board. It would be a Lamar, and then Sam Darnold may be the second one, or Baker, one of the two, and then Josh Rosen. You want to talk about being on the side of a milk carton? Well, where he fits in the league, I would like to point out, Josh Rosen is younger than Joe Burrow, like right now, just age, and that's another thing to factor in, I think, with these prospects. Some of them are at different points in their life. Some are actually 20 years old, or maybe even 19. Like, it's graduating early, leaving school early. It's such a case-by-case scenario. So I think so many people are eager to judge a class not only the day after the draft, but even just one season they see, and it's like, well, clearly this guy was the best from the group. Well, if you just did one season from that quarterback class, you'd be all about Baker Mayfield and nobody else, and that wouldn't be fair to that class. So I believe you really have to vet it out and give at least 3 seasons before you put down anything in ink, anyways.
Well, no, you're right. And you have to give them time to develop, right? And to grow into who they're going to become at the NFL level. Because all these guys are so young, and it takes some of them longer to develop than others. And some of them get a great opportunity right away, and others don't until year 3, year 4, year 5 in the league, maybe, if they even get to year 5 in the league to showcase their true abilities and talents. So we'll see with this year's draft class. And with that being said, to really write a player's name down and say he's going to become an All-Pro or Hall of Famer one day, it's premature. And even though I just said that, Joe, I got to put you on the spot, and I'll leave you with this. If there's one player you think from this year's draft that becomes a Hall of Famer, who is that guy right now as we speak here on this week's episode of Sundays with Dominic and Vito?
Oh, from the whole group, it'd be Chase Young.
And now, why is that for you, Joe? What makes him so special? And, I've heard about him being a generational talent. So what makes him a guy that can become a Hall of Famer one day?
Well, not only the athletic ability, the bend he has, he's got great genes. His father was a high-quality basketball player, but the pedigree of program he comes up, the coaching he's had from Larry Johnson, and you know how many great ones Larry Johnson's produced. And I only have to harken back to the Bosas, but there's a number of evaluators saying that he was a better prospect in Columbus than both Bosa brothers. Be that as it will, I would look at those two cats potentially trying to fight for a gold jacket themselves. But Young, with what he was able to do, he's the one that I believe in the most. And not only that, it's all about scripting games. When you watch Ohio State play, watch the other offense. You don't even have to watch Chase. They scheme against him. You only have to go back to that the semifinal game in college football. Clemson's fighting for their lives to get to that final game. What they ended up doing, flat out option. They would use Chase Young against Ohio State. They had to scheme him specifically, whereas a lot of teams tried to run away from him. That's just not going to happen with the talent that the Buckeyes had. So what Clemson ended up doing, it was triple option, consistent option play, and they'd make it to a point where Chase Young had to choose 1, 2, or 3, and they forced him to be wrong, and then they schemed it around him. That was the only way to beat him. It was almost like using his talent against him. To me, that was drastic measures, and it was copied, it seemed like, in the NFL with Kansas City versus San Francisco against the Bosa young Nick. I think when an entire offense and an entire game plan is designed around you, that speaks volumes, and that's what kind of player Young is to the opposition, not necessarily even to his teammates, which he's huge. It's that how the whole defense is run for Ohio State. The talent's clearly there, and also I probably am a broken record, Vito, but character, intangibles is through the roof with Young. He's a real sharp kid, but he's also just taken this whole process since he arrived at Columbus so seriously. He works on his body. I think this is a professional already before he even starts to collect a paycheck. He's been treating this like his vocation since he was a teenager. And that, to me, is somebody that's not only going to be a great pro, but he has a real chance to, like we said, I mean, we can't know. I mean, a whole lot can happen from 20 to 25. I mean, if I was judged by how I have my life together in my early 20s, whew, I was pretty much a mess. Whereas, like talking to Chase, this kid has his act together. He is pointed in the right direction, and he strikes me as a guy that's going to make every last sacrifice to make himself into a great player. But he already is, I think, just a phenomenal athlete, and he's accomplished a lot. But this guy has the world in front of him right now, and that's, to me, if I had to pick any of them that have a chance to be wearing that gold jacket, it'd be Chase.
And he might be young, no pun intended, but he plays like a 10-year veteran in the league, right? I mean, he has that ability, that professionalism about him. And I love how you can bring to the table, like for my podcast here, Joe, the aspect of talking to these guys, what they're like off the field, because that is ultra important. And especially if you're going to play a long career in the NFL. You might get away with it, I think, Joe, for a few years in the league, but then you get found out. And I think you get lost in translation, and teams will start passing on you despite how talented you are. So you got to have the talent. I mean, that's the first priority, the most important thing, in my opinion, at least. But then you also have to have the ability off the field to carry yourself in a professional manner. Chase Young has that. Jeff Okudah has that. You see these Ohio State dudes from that program, rich in tradition and a winning program, that have that mentality and persona already right when they come out of college, and they're young dudes once again. I mean, they're in their early 20s, barely 20, 21 years young, as I like to say. No pun intended once again for Chase Young. And they already have their crap together. They already know what they're doing. And for you, you said you were lost. A lot of people, including myself in our early 20s, I have been lost. I'm still in my mid-20s now, a little bit lost. And it takes time to really grow and mature. So for these guys to be so mature and professional right away, man, I mean, that's just so darn impressive about some of these dudes coming out of college, and these guys that become elite NFL talents too, and from day one.
I've done a lot of investigation here in Indy into the Colts and their process, and they've got ex-military Green Beret psychologists interviewing every player that they could possibly draft because they want the psychological background, the character, just where they're coming from, what environment they've been in, and that is so much more paramount almost than talent. I mean, everyone's talent. You're getting drafted. you are one heck of a player. That's the bottom line. I mean, everyone in this league can play, but I think that's what delineates the good to great. That's what is the marker from a guy that has a chance to start a long time as opposed to a guy that will only play his one contract and might be on another team and may fizzle out of the league. To teams nowadays, what it means to be a fit in their locker room and what it means to be a Lion, what it means to be a Colt. Like, it's that to them has become, like I said, it's just become paramount. The background, the intangibles, and the character of an individual is, I think, first and foremost on a lot of NFL teams' priority list.
You have to fit the culture. I mean, teams are trying to build and implement a culture. I mean, the Lions with Matt Patricia, maybe he's been too hardcore with it and over the edge at times, and it's gotten some guys wanting out, and guys have left the Lions, have been traded from the Lions subsequently. But I guess you have to establish a culture. The Lions are trying to do that right now in Motown, and guess what? It's why they drafted the majority of the guys they did, maybe outside of Quinton Cephas, right? Outside of him, maybe. A lot of these guys are known to be good locker room dudes. So Lions are trying to establish that culture, that mentality. And we'll see in 2020 if it does work out for them, for Quinn Trisha, as I like to say once again affectionately. Hey, this season's a huge year. If they don't turn it around, I think they both will be out of a job at season's end.
No doubt about it, but I think that's, like you said, they want to improve the room and have guys they can count on in what is a crucial year. I think that's why you bring in a Jamie Collins, and that's why it's so important to have not necessarily people you know, but people you can trust. And I look at that Frank Ragnow pick 2 seasons ago, Hawkinson, those are guys similar. You just get to talking to them, get to know them, what they're bringing to the table, and just that desire they've got to be great. That's the type of folks you want to add to the room, and as you said, just improve your culture and keep your culture sound, and make sure that everyone not only is on the same page, but everyone is as hungry as the next man.
And Joe, even in the 6th round, I mean, they took John Pennicini out of Utah. Even getting a guy like that, I mean, known to be a mature dude, all about the culture, can fit in, let's say. It's really important. So even with your late round draft picks that might never even take a snap with the team, might only be practice squad guys or not even really have a full-blown NFL career. But still, a team like the Lions are really trying to implement that culture hardcore to the extent where they care about it all throughout the draft.
Oh, and if you play for Kyle Whittingham at Utah, you are a man's man. You cannot survive on campus there and play that much ball for him without being a battle-tested, proven warrior. And Pennicini does. He's got violent hands. He will flat out strike you. And now he's entering, I think, a crowded room there. It's going to be highly competitive if he wants to get on the field. But he's got an opportunity to prove it, and that's the type you want to add at the end. Just somebody that is going to fight like a dog just to get a position on the squad and just get that roster spot. I think Pennicini, he's definitely going to bring some fight to the field. That is a violent player.
A ferocious dude. And a lot of these guys have that mentality. And Pennicini, I love that last name, John Pennicini. I mean, who will forget that last name now? Even out of a 6th rounder, you're probably not going to forget it. And yeah, I wish him the best of luck, all the 2020 draft picks. And it was really an incredible draft once again, even done virtually with the crazy times and difficult times with the coronavirus pandemic. And Joe, I'll leave you with that. With that being said, great stuff from you as usual, man. It was great catching up. It was too long from the time we last talked to now. We got to start doing this much more frequently like we used to do back in the day as well.
Great to be on, Vito. It has been too long. And, hey, I'm just appreciative of being around to talk a little ball. It's always nice.
Absolutely, man. It's a distraction, right? To keep our mind off of the pandemic and all the craziness with that. And, hey, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk again sometime soon.
Likewise, Vito. Take care, man.
Thank you.